Hey guys, welcome to the second episode of the Jameson Journey. I'm so excited that you're joining me here. Today, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about communication with your spouse. Now, before all of you married people that have been married for 10, 15, 20, 30 years start exiting out of this video because you know way more than I do, and I totally agree with that. I want you to know that this video is not me saying that I am perfect at communication, but that I want to talk about some funny stories and some really cool practical ways that I've learned as a newlywed how to communicate in a better way. So I read the statistic online that 67% of marriages that end in divorce end because of bad communication skills. And so with hearing that, I wanted to make sure that this is something that not only I am talking about with my spouse, with Brad, but also talking about with you guys. And I want to start conversation with how can we be better communicators? What are practical ways to be better communicators? I have 3 practical ways that Brad and I are really focusing on as we're newlyweds and as we come across those times where we have bad miscommunication. The first thing I want to talk about is a really silly story of the first time we had like a really big miscommunication, and it's honestly the stupidest thing you will ever hear. Like, you're going to hear the story and be like, seriously, you miscommunicated about that? But it's funny because it just shows how small of something can be such a big miscommunication and cause a problem. So when we were on vacation with my family this summer, Brad and I don't drink. But some of my family does, which is totally fine. And they were making margaritas, and they were using a glass pitcher to put the margaritas in. And the pitcher was in the shape of a whale. And so I was just being silly. My family and I, we joke all the time. And so my brother's like, okay, we're putting the virgin margaritas in the whale pitcher. And I said, oh, what are you trying to say about me and Brad what are you trying to say? I didn't even say anything. I just said, what are you trying to say about me and Brad? And I kind of chuckled thinking like, oh, like that was funny. Like, he was trying to say that we're fat because he was putting our drink in the whale mug. Like, it was so stupid, but I was just trying to be funny and be silly. And Brad like tapped my leg under the table and was like, babe, stop. And I was like, what? And he was like, babe, don't. And I was like, why are you getting upset with me for like saying a joke, And so anyway, I kind of shut down. I was all quiet because that's what I do when I get upset. And I know that that's not healthy, and I'm working on that. And but I know that that is something that a lot of people will do when they get upset, is they shut down. And so I got really quiet, and he asked me what was wrong. And I was like, I don't want to talk about it. And I was being all quiet. And he's like, babe, like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I just don't understand why you tapped my leg and asked me to be quiet and to not talk about it. Like, I was just trying to be funny. And he's like, okay, well, it just felt really uncomfortable and I just didn't like it. And I'm like, you didn't like it? I was like, why didn't you like it? Like, I was just being silly. Like, it was just a joke. And anyway, for like 5 minutes, we were back and forth until finally he said, babe, I didn't want to talk to your brother about virginity and about sex. And I was like, what? I'm like, I was talking about the whale mug, the whale pitcher that they were putting the drinks in. I was saying like, oh, you're trying to talk about us like we're fat because we're in the whale cup. And he's like, oh, I thought you were saying, what are you trying to say about us about the virgin drinks and talking about virginity? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is literally the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But we totally miscommunicated on that, and we totally messed up, and that caused a fight. Again, once we realized what we were disagreeing on or miscommunicating about, we both kind of laughed because we were like, wow, we really just got in an argument about that. But that just shows you how small something can be, and it can turn into such a big disagreement or miscommunication. And so today I want to talk about 3 ways that we could be better communicators. The first way that I have written down is, before you enter a conversation with your partner, with your spouse, with your coworker, make sure to check your tone of voice. For me, this is really tough because sometimes when I'm upset or when I'm trying to get a point across, I don't always check my tone. And sometimes I can say things maybe not in the kindest way. Sometimes it's, when I'm sad or I'm shut down, it comes across really rude and quiet and passive. Sometimes when I'm really frustrated, maybe I just say something really snippy or snappy because I'm frustrated and I want to get my point across. And so the first thing that I've really learned that if I can come to a conversation or a serious conversation with a kind tone of voice, it's going to be received a lot better by Brad than it would if I came across in a rude way. And so I think the first thing is really checking our tone, because if we want someone to receive what we're saying, if we can say it with a kind tone, with a calm tone, they're going to receive that as less aggressive, less snappy, less rude, and they're going to take what you're saying and actually listen to it. I also have a verse here. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And that's Proverbs 15:1. And so that's just a really good verse to remind you that if you're going to have a soft answer, that's going to turn away wrath. That's going to turn away the fight. But if you are talking with a harsh word, then that's going to stir up anger in either you or your partner. So that first lesson is really to watch your tone before you start a conversation with your partner. The second is, instead of assuming what your significant other means, ask probing questions to see what they're trying to say. So this happens with Brad and I all the time. I am very analytical. I think really deeply into what he's saying, and sometimes what he's saying is really actually just surface level. And so sometimes he'll say something and I take it one way. Like he may be telling me a story about something, or he may be making a point about scripture or something. And I will think in my head, that literally makes no sense. I don't understand. And so sometimes I'll just assume, well, this is what he meant by it. And then I'll get frustrated or upset. And he's like, why are you frustrated? And I'm like, because this is what you said. And he's like, that's not what I meant. And so instead of just assuming what he means, what I'm trying to get better at is ask probing questions. Like, this is what you said. This is what I think I heard you say, and this is what I'm understanding. And then he'll come back and say, oh, no, that's not what I meant. What I meant was this, and that. And then I'm like, oh, okay. And that just causes the fight to stop immediately, because there is no fight to be had, because now I have understanding of exactly what he was saying. And so that's the second point, is to ask probing questions. Don't just always assume that you know what your partner means. A lot of times we say things and it comes across one way, but really we're trying to say something different. So I would say really encourage you to ask probing questions when talking to your partner. Another verse that I have is, a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. Proverbs 18:2. So if you're a fool, then all you want to do is express your opinion and you don't want to understand. And so instead of being a fool in the relationship, take time to really understand and ask why your partner is saying what they are saying and what they mean by what they are saying, instead of assuming and causing a fight. Again, this is something I'm working on right now. I'm very good at just assuming the worst. I think that in a lot of areas of my life. And so I'm trying really hard to assume the best and ask questions to see if what I initially thought was what they were saying is what they are saying. So the third is to pray together each day. We're connected spiritually and mentally with our partners and physically, but I realize and I've seen that when we're not connected on a spiritual level, then it's a lot harder for us to connect on a mental level. And so I notice that when we are praying together every day, in the morning, at night, just praying for our relationship, praying for our jobs, our life, our next steps and what God has for us, I notice that it's a lot easier for us to communicate because we're connecting on a spiritual level. A verse that I love to share with you is Matthew 18:19-20. And it says, again, I say to you, if two of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by the Father in heaven. For where two or more are gathered in my name, there I am among you. And so I think that when two of us are together, when you are with your spouse and you're able to outwardly express prayer together, that God is with you and that you are going to connect on that spiritual level, and then with that be able to connect on a mental and physical level as well. And so I think prayer is so vital to our communication with our spouse and making sure that we're praying. When I notice that I'm not in the Word or I'm not praying with Brad, that's when I notice that our communication gets a little iffy. And sometimes that's when I see more and more fights happening, is when we're not focusing on our spiritual walk together. So that's the third point. So all in all, number one is focusing on your tone with your spouse when you come into a conversation. Number two is not just assuming what they're saying or what they're talking about, but ask probing questions to see what they truly mean. And number three is to pray together on a daily basis, just to make sure that you guys are connecting on a spiritual level, and that way you can also connect on a mental level. I want to leave you with this verse, Romans 12:12. I actually got it tattooed right here. It's Brad's favorite verse, and it's actually up here on our little wall back here. And it says, rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, and be constant in prayer. And so I think that that is a perfect verse to end with when you're thinking of communicating with your spouse, when you're thinking of your life with your spouse. Live by Romans 12:12. Remember it. Live by it, memorize it, say it every day. And before you go into a conversation with your spouse, say that verse over and over in your head and pray that your tone will come across in a godly manner. So today, that is what I wanted to talk about, a little bit about our experience with really odd miscommunication, as you can tell. And sometimes it's just the silliest, smallest things that can cause miscommunication. So really, if you're having trouble communicating with your partner, try these 3 things and see how that changes your communication going forward. We'll see you next time on the Jameson Journey.